today's episode of Hubris Syndrome, we're going over your games of the decade. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I was just recently made aware of the official EZA Allies Forums Games of the Decade list. Out of control. So we're gonna go over some of these. I know it's October. We're gonna get into the spooky stuff once we get a little closer to Halloween. And then later down the line, before the next gen consoles launch, before the year is out, I will be doing my games of the decade. But this is all about you, EZA Allies. So let's dive in to the top 4 games of the decade. First up, number 4, without question, God of War.
See? Tips are too wide. Mountain goat?
Your mother taught you well.
God of War, hands down, one of the greatest video games ever made. Every single human being on planet Earth should have the opportunity to charge R2 with the Leviathan axe. Just a masterpiece of a video game. One of the most successful sequel reboots I've ever had the privilege to play. You know, you hear it all the time. People that were not into Kratos, they were not into God of War, this franchise, and this new direction, this older Kratos with his son, the over-the-shoulder camera with one long take was just undeniable. And I know I've been promising that I would stream this game for years now. I'm just holding out a little longer until the PS5 launches. We'll see how this backwards compatibility works, or if we're ever gonna get a remaster of this game, who knows. But this is just the beginning, because God of War Ragnarok is launching supposedly in 2021. Even if it's not, take your time, Sony. There's no rush for this thing. Seriously, cool it. Just chill out. There's no rush. It's only been a few years, okay? We can wait. Now we're into the top 3 video games of the decade. No surprise here. Number 3, The Last of Us.
What if it's true?
Do I need to remind you what is out there?
The Last of Us Part 1. I want to start calling it Part 1. If we call it Part 2, can we call it Part 1? Is that a thing? The Last of Us Part 1, Children of Men vibes, whereas Last of Us Part 2 is more in line with War for the Planet of the Apes. But the Children of Men intimate tale of Joel just trying to get Ellie across the country is so beautiful in its simplicity. There's just so much time for these two characters to bond over this journey, and the characters you meet along the way are also unforgettable. Sam and Bill, and obviously Tess and Tommy and Maria. There are just some really awesome acts in this game, and it was quite the send-off for the generation. You know, it's kind of where we are now with Cyberpunk on the horizon, and of course Last of Us Part 2. I know it's an extremely divisive game, but the send-off to a generation is an exciting place to be. You know, it's been 7 years since The Last of Us. What do you think? Has the story aged well? Does it still hold up to you? Because to me, it absolutely does. That was the main praise when it came out. You had your detractors and your naysayers saying, oh, the gameplay is not that great, which I will disagree with till the end of time. I love the stealth. I love the brutality. I love the shades of survival horror when it comes to item management. But obviously the story was the number one thing. I had loved video game stories before The Last of Us, and it was always one of my favorite things is going through story-driven games. But that was probably, at that point, the best story I'd ever played. Next up, number 2. Ian's upset why it's not number 1, Bloodborne.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire?
So just 1 year after Dark Souls 2, in comes Bloodborne. And similar to God of War, it got people on board that weren't necessarily into Souls. Completely different atmosphere, completely different type of pace, Bloodborne, obviously, way more hectic. First and foremost was the look. You know, I cite Brandon Jones immediately. Brandon Jones comes to mind of the aesthetic. Just from the word go, this gothic horror had such a different vibe than the medieval fantasy of Dark Souls, so that got a lot of people on board. And the fact that it's not a sequel, you know, we said earlier, God of War, it didn't have a number on it, so it has this welcoming vibe, this fresh start feeling. You didn't feel left out in the cold, you know, you could hop right in. And just how beautiful it looked, just the combat, everything about Bloodborne. I mean, how many times have you heard Easy Allies compare something to Bloodborne or bring up Bloodborne? Similar to God of War, I've been waiting for a remaster or an upgrade to this game for quite a while. When it came out, beat it 3 or 4 times for that platinum right away. Haven't really gone back. Sometimes I'll go back because it has one of my favorite weapons of all time, the Kirk Hammer, which I probably like. Don't tell Cory Barlog, please. Kirk Hammer over the Leviathan Axe, especially when you put some fire paper on that thing and it's just this flaming massive hammer. It's out of control. And of course the trick weapons, you know, the Kirk Hammer is this giant hammer, but then when you're going through basic mobs, you can use the sword part of it, and then when he sticks the sword into the hammer, it's just one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life. I can't even handle it. And of course the giant spectacle, you know, these bosses are massive, intimidating, and memorable. It's just one of the greatest games ever made, and one of the greatest games of the decade, no question, voted by you and Easy Allies, Ian Hank, Brad Ellis, myself, Penn, we're all of it. It's Bloodborne. And last, but certainly not least, every single mainline entry in this franchise is an easy 10 out of 10, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. You know, you compare this to the numbers 2, 3, and 4 on the list, and there's just something warm about it, something a little less gruesome and intense, and I think that matters. You know, you're dealing with Calamity Ganon, you're dealing with the end of the world, but you're Link and Zelda, you know things are gonna be okay in the end. Probably, it's Nintendo, it's Zelda, so you know you're gonna stop this end of the world. There's some kind of cathartic feeling in that. And not just the story, but the gameplay as well. Climbing anywhere. I know the temples always get brought up as kind of the weakness, but in criticizing those, I still want to give praise to the shrines. Because on paper, you're going to all these shrines that have the potential to be so samey and similar, but they were just so fun to crack and to solve, just all these little mini games. They were so rewarding, and they really caught me off guard how much I would be invested in this. And all the towns, you can check out Easy Allies top 10 towns to know again why this is number 1, because look at all these towns, you know. We got Terry Town, Gerudo Town. These are memorable places that will stick in my brain forever. And just being able to climb anything. The exploration in this game is some of my all-time favorite. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me from Breath of the Wild, is how cozy it is, the towns, the bonds, the relationships, the puzzles not being too intimidating, you know? Sometimes I still get stuck on the water temples in other Zeldas, I'm sorry. This game had just such a nice curve. I was never fully stuck in any given place for too long, and just being able to climb anywhere and explore. Not to criticize Skyrim, but some of the exploration in that game was, it felt meaningless to me because of the way enemies scaled. It was like, oh cool, I got a good weapon, but it still doesn't feel like I'm getting that much more powerful. Whereas in Zelda, just exploring every nook and cranny was a joy, it was a privilege, and it was unforgettable. So that's gonna do it for the episode. Those were Easy Allies Forum's official games of the decade. As we get closer to next gen and Halloween, you'll be seeing some Halloween episodes, some of my games of the decade, some next gen hype launch. That's gonna do it. And I'm Michael P. Huber. We are Easy Allies. See you next time.